Hi, this is Tom Kessler. Thank you for listening to this video. The purpose and subject of today's video is graduate level writing for graduate students. The reason I'm preparing this lecture and offering it to you along with the checklist is because in graduate school, writing is a significant part of faculty grading criteria. And you'll have to do a considerable amount of writing. And there's an expectation of employers that when you have a graduate degree, that you're a reasonably accomplished writer. So what I wanted to do was to review with you this document and go over the rules, really guidelines that are expected in terms of writing an effective graduate paper. And that's what you see on this first page. It basically says, as you move from baccalaureate to graduate level education, writing demands and expectations increase. And so there's a little bit of an introduction, but what I really wanted to cover was the key topics of this particular document. Topic one that we'll cover is general writing considerations and requirements. Topic two, we'll talk about APA formatting. Topic three is an APA issue as well, which is how to format the cover page, the report title and subtitles. We'll talk about how to cite sources in APA, how to format your citations, how to structure and format the references section. And then finally, we'll end with a topic of tense, present, past, or future tense, focused around the word will, which students very often will not use correctly. And so we'll sort of talk about that as we go along. I've prepared this checklist and you can sort of see how it's structured in a table. And I've got the topics, and then on the left, I have the general guideline. And on the right, I try to use examples. Now, the examples that you'll see in this document are real cases or instances that I've extracted from the many student papers that I've reviewed over the years. So let's talk about topic one, writing considerations and requirements. These are general guidelines. Number 1-1, spelling and other grammatical and typographical errors. When you think about writing and you present a written product to someone else, it's a reflection of yourself. It really says, here's a written product that I produced, and it shows me, it shows what I am. Just like I always say, just like, how you dress at work, are you professional looking in your appearance, or less so? Do you wear sandals to work or whatever? And writing is the same way. And so we need to make sure when we do our written products in graduate school that the submissions are free of grammatical, spelling, and typographical errors. For this reason, I strongly encourage everyone to submit their work to the Writing Center at their university, or to have someone that they know and trust just read over it, because in this era of keyboards and text messaging, very often we'll just kind of make errors as we go. I'm very prone to this myself, while I'm thinking ahead about what I want to say, and I make typos and stuff. So you need to get those cleaned up. So have someone read the draft of what you've written before you submit it for grading. We have online writing centers at our various universities. Central Michigan has a very effective online writing center. University of Baltimore, where I teach, has one as well. Second guideline is no personal pronouns. In academic writing, we have to project a sense of objectivity and not personal bias, personal views. And so we just simply cannot use personal pronouns in our writing at all in our graduate papers, unless you have a very specific instance where your professor tells you to do so. So we're not going to say, I am going to give out these surveys, or our group had this problem, or we or my. We're just going to not use personal pronouns. It just introduces a level of intimacy and creates a potential for bias. And in grad school, we're always really trying to be objective and not biased in our work. And so no personal pronouns at all, any place. And so the example I cited here is, students often will say, our approach is to do such and such and so and so. Now let's talk about subsections. When we write chapters, especially if they have a significant amount of complexity, we need to break those chapters into pieces or subsections. And so when we use subsections, I always, we don't want to call it subsection 1 or subsection 2, or just label the sections with numbers or alphabet. So students have to use descriptive subtitles, and that enables the readers to more effectively get through the reports and chapters as they go. An example on the right-hand side is in a research paper or a research proposal, a subsection called the data collection approach. And that lets the reader know what's about to come in this subsection. No one paragraph subsections. And we're not writing outlines. And so you wouldn't have a subsection title and then just a single paragraph in that subsection. If that's the case, it probably can be combined with the preceding or the subsequent subsection. So, and so no subsection, no one paragraph subsections. You'll see me also say in just a second here when we talk about a paragraph itself, what's the length and structure of a paragraph? And I often say to students who don't write a lot, and it's been a while since you were in school, writing is use it or lose it. And if you don't write a lot, it's really easy to forget. And so students get out of school and then they tend to forget this concept of indenting in paragraphs. And so, you'll see the writing, and there's just never any break in the writing. It's just this wall of words. And so in terms of paragraph length, you should never have more than 6 sentences in a paragraph. If you've got 20 sentences without a break, you have a problem. So paragraph length has to be managed. No one sentence paragraphs either. No, not too short, not too long. A one sentence paragraph starts to look like an outline. We just don't do them. You're not writing an outline. So single sentence paragraphs should really be combined with the next paragraph. And then 133, no extremely long paragraphs. I call them paragraphs of doom. I had a professional organization one time warn me about submitting a wall of words. And so these are overly long paragraphs. I mean, if your paragraph is a page and a half, it's not a paragraph. So paragraph length has to be managed and has to be managed effectively. It's extremely common for me to receive papers where there's no paragraphs at all. There's just a massive amount of writing. Sometimes students will believe that when you get to answer questions, that the answer for a particular question is just one set of words with no paragraphs. But even if you're in a question answer format, you still need to group your responses into paragraphs. Indenting, all paragraphs have to be indented in APA style. A paragraph, what is it? It's a collection of sentences related to a central theme or topic. If you've got 2 pages of sentences, they probably don't relate. They're probably a congregation, an assembly of just thoughts and ideas that are all over the place. And so we had to be careful about paragraphs and writing paragraphs. Bullet lists in scholarly papers and in academic papers. We just don't do bullet lists. We use them very sparingly. Sometimes when I receive a paper and students got 2 pages, they've taken an article and they said, in the article, they said you should do the following things, and then they have a list of bullets for 2 pages. It looks to me like students trying to make the paper seem longer, right? It just doesn't work. So use bullet lists sparingly. Express your thoughts in the expository style. Summarize what are the main points from those bullets. There are appropriate use of lists if you want to highlight something to stand out, as long as it's not too long, like the major research sub-questions of your paper, that makes sense. But a list should never be more than 1/3 of a page in length, never, ever. Avoid lists in most cases. Inappropriate uses of a list, inappropriate, especially when presenting a review of literature and other factual content, to use long bullet lists. Summarize the main message from that list of bullets. Just do not use them. Common grammatical problems that we run into when we're writing at the graduate level: run-on sentences. It's just amazing how often I see this. 2 distinct sentences written as a single sentence, separated by a comma. And there's an example on the right-hand side. Here's the example. There were 2 approaches to use. One was to reduce the number and the other was to increase staff. Written as 1 sentence, but you can see that's really 2 sentences. And you can solve it in two ways. One is split it in two sentences. The other way is put a semicolon in to break the sentence into two parts. Sentence fragments, again, a common thing that we encounter. A sentence fragment's an incomplete sentence because it lacks a subject, verb, or independent clause. Example, the moon is round, far away too. The far away too is not a complete sentence, it's a sentence fragment, right? Here's another one on the right-hand side. Looking at other organizations on the list of great places to work and reviewing their best practices and what they're doing to retain their team members. It's a fragment, right? It's not a complete sentence. What is it trying to say, really? 153, incorrectly spelled words, misspellings, common when writing quickly. Modern technology has made this very common. It's easy to use wrong words. I did this the other day. I sent out an announcement and I had a THEIR instead of THERE. And then a lot of students, I don't know if this is a regional language thing, or they say loose instead of lose. Like I lose my book or whatever. So you have to be very careful about that. And then you can see examples on the right-hand side that have adopted wellness programs. What have they done, DON, so, and what benefits have they realized? I took that out of a paper. You can see all the spelling issues there, right? And then another one is, to the roster of activities a student can participate in. It's just common. I just see this all the time. Grammar, using grammar properly. I always say writing is use it or lose it. And so if you don't practice, you don't have repetition, it's easy for your writing skills to lapse. And so you really have to have things edited before you submit them. Some examples: the number of students in the district school has enrolled. The number of students in the district school has enrolled determines the amount. Actual example. Coaches understanding this have came up with other ways to. So again, issues that we encounter very commonly, and we really need to be careful and to avoid. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about formatting a paper. A lot of times your instructor will give you some guidance on formatting your papers, but this is what the APA says we should do, and we're going to use the APA style. So in terms of formatting the paper, 8.5 by 11, 1-inch margins on both sides, no smaller, no larger. Sometimes students will go 1.5, but you can't do that. Number all pages in the upper right-hand corner. This is APA 7th edition. Left justify the content, don't center justify, where it spreads it out. So you got even edges on both sides of the paper. We don't do that. We left justify, we don't center justify. Indent all paragraphs. It's very, very common to see paragraphs either not indented or overly indented twice. So 5 spaces, 1 press, no exceptions. Be careful not to indent too far, and make sure you indent all paragraphs. Font and type size, you can use Times New Roman. This has really been updated with APA 7. They are more flexible in their fonts. So even though this says do not use any other font, I'll change this before I give this to any student, because APA has gone a little more flexible in the fonts. But be careful and try not to do like big, bold, and then different fonts and mixture fonts. Use one font and stay with it consistently. In terms of bolds, you can only use bolds, if your instructor says use bold in APA, we don't use bold. Same with italic and underline. In general, we don't italicize or underline any words, including the title, anywhere in the report. And I find that that's a very common thing. Students like to put bold and underline and italics. Spacing on the cover page, it's the only page of the entire report that's single spaced. Every other page, including references, it is double spaced. And when I say double spaced, I don't mean 1.2 or 1.5, I mean 2.0 in Microsoft or whatever word processor you're using. So everything else other than the cover page double spaced. Only the cover page itself is single spaced. Chapters, references, reference pages all should have start on a new page. Never start a chapter title in the middle of a previous page. Blank lines and spaces. Students love to have a lot of spacing in between their paragraphs. I guess it makes it seem like they're writing a longer paper, but APA is a very tight writing style. So no blank lines and no extra spacing in between paragraphs and sections. Keep everything nice and tight. No extra spacing before and after sections of paragraphs. And I show you on this thing how to set this. in Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, if you are having problems and you're still getting spacing, even though there's no blank line there. So you can see on my guidelines here, I show you how to set that. Let's talk about spelling and abbreviating proper nouns, formal names of organizations, persons, places, and things. Proper nouns have to be capitalized. Humana Healthcare would all be capitalized. Dr. Lathan would be capitalized. University of Maryland. The major words are capitalized, University of Maryland, but the word of is not, and so on. So be careful about capitalization. Make sure proper nouns are capitalized. In terms of long names that you don't want to keep repeating through over and over throughout your report, you can abbreviate a long name. And the way you do that is the very first time in a report where you spell out the full name, in parentheses, you put the abbreviation that you're going to use, the one and only abbreviation. Now, if you're going to use two different forms, short forms of the name, then you need to put both of those in the parens, because I find students sometimes will say University of Maryland, and they'll say the school, and then they'll say UM and the school and the university, and they'll switch. So you can't do that. When you put a name in parentheses, that's what you have to call the organization or the proper noun thereafter throughout the paper. So lots of examples here, and you can see how this looks, right? So, and you can see the incorrect example on the right-hand side. Financial Services Corp is a finance company, right? So we're using Financial Services Corporation was founded, and then later Financial Services is known as, and then another paragraph later referred to Financial Services Corporation as the company, and you can't do that. When you put a name in parentheses, that's the name that you're going to use for the rest of the paper. Easy one here, writing numbers. Numbers 0 through 9 are spelled out fully. Once you get to 10 and up, they're always written as numerals. I practice this in my emails and everything. I try to keep consistent on this. Numerals are never the first word in a sentence. Like you would never see a 2 and a 5, a numeral starting in the beginning of a sentence. Never. Right. Abstract, executive summaries. Use those when directed to do so. Otherwise, don't use those. Okay, let's go to topic 3. On topic 3, it's formatting the cover page, the report title, and the subtitles. In terms of the cover page, single space to cover page, I already mentioned that earlier. The report title has to be 2 inches below the top of the page, not right at the top of the page. And I show you here how to cause it to drop down a little bit if you need to. Also, we like to spread if your title's long and it needs 2 lines, rather than have just one word on the second line, I show you here how to get to the middle, some appropriate place in the title, and then to hit the shift key and the enter key, and then it'll break it down into 2 balanced lines. And so make sure your report title is centered and if it's across 2 lines. The format of the title, capitalize every single letter, not just the first letter of the title. It's just massively common problem issue that students don't capitalize the titles on the cover page. No bold words, no italic words, no title longer than 12 words, never format the title as a question, no punctuation marks at the end of the title, and no abbreviations in the title in general, unless it's like a massively long organization name. Organization names that are commonly recognized can be abbreviated, like the FBI, whatever. In this case, it says spell it out, but if you had it FBI in the title, it would be okay. But generally, in a formal sense, we like to spell out the title, all abbreviations in a title, and then we can start the abbreviation model that we talked about earlier when we get into the body of the paper. And then just be careful about typos, especially in the report title. It's shocking to me how many people submit papers with a typo in the report title. What am I supposed to think about a paper when it comes in and the cover page has a typo in the title? Immediately, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be a good paper. And so look at these examples on the right-hand side. These are real examples, right? Information, it's got 2 T's. Down below, program 4 construction, right? Okay. And then you can see on the 3rd example, extracurricular is spelled wrong. So just be careful that, have somebody look at that title before you submit it. The chapter title and subtitle format, chapter titles always start on a new page, chapters and references sections and appendices. There's a format here for subtitles. And the first level subtitle is the chapter title. So it's centered, bold title case. And then when you get to the second level, everything is left. And the third level, everything's left and italicized. So these are the cases where you can use bold and italics. The fourth level, it's indented, and the paragraph begins right at the end of the subtitle. And then at the fifth level, if you're ever going to have 5 levels, that means you're going in, subtopic to a subtopic to a subtopic. You probably won't use that 4th or 5th level very often. In terms of citing sources, requirements for citing sources: don't plagiarize, cite all factual information. Very often students will start out their paper talking about the organization, it was founded in this date by these people. And there's no citations, right? That has to be cited. Those are facts. And so very often it'll be coming from a website or a document or something. So cite your sources and just make sure that you always, when there's a factual statement, that you include a citation. Cite sources from published articles and studies. Always use the format in the section below that talks about the format. If you have sources for history, background, or details, some sources might be published, but others might be informal. It might be a website or a published report. It might be a document that's not available to the public. And so you still include the entry in your references, but when you include the entry in your references, you say that it's an unpublished report or document. Because what you're trying to do is to help your reader get to the information by sending them to the references, and then the references tell them where the information is. And when you say in the references that it's a unpublished report or document, then they know that they can't go get the information. Citing informal or unpublished document citations, just indicate that it's unpublished. Citing information obtained from unpublished reports, verbally from others, or based on personal knowledge of the organization. A lot of students want to talk about the situation they know about, but they didn't get the information from any source. Use footnotes in that case. Put a footnote and then right at the bottom of the page, indicate, as I said here, information obtained or observed through casual conversation, rather than part of a formal data collection effort or whatever. But put a footnote in there to say that this information comes from talking with my colleagues or whatever. So, but don't say my, because that's a personal pronoun. How do we cite sources? Okay, it's very important. And I have to help students with this all the time. No dangling citations. Never, ever, ever, ever would you have a citation sitting outside of a punctuation mark between 2 sentences. We just don't do this. It's not the way you do citations, right? So you can see on the right-hand side, many leaders do not understand transformational leadership, period. Kessler 2000, never, as soon as I say, oh no. And so it has to be inside that sentence. Now, what that means is that citation applies to that sentence, right? And you can do it one of 2 ways. You can have the citation at the end, or you can begin the sentence with the citation. Kessler 2000 found that many leaders do not understand transformational leadership. If you start it with a citation, then the name's outside the parentheses. Important to remember. If you have an entire paragraph of information that all came from the same source, generally, you start the paragraph out by saying Kessler 2000 found, and then the rest of the paragraph is generally considered to be paraphrased from that source. Or you can cite each individual sentence. In a paragraph, you might have 3 different citations. And so in that case, you need at the end of sentence 1, a citation in sentence 2 and sentence 3 or whatever. And so from a stylistic perspective, what's the right way to do it? It's better stylistically to have some paragraphs that are fully cited at the beginning, and then other cases where there's individual citations within a paragraph. Stylistically, it's just better to do that. How do we format the citations? This is really important. APA is a really concise writing style. We generally like to avoid these phrases, and students love to put these phrases in. In an article by Kessler, or in a study by, and that's just, those are wasted words. Those are extra words and you don't need them. Go right to the source. Say Kessler, you can see on the right-hand side, in an article by Kessler, no. Kessler, or in a study by Jones, no. Jones and Smith found, right? So none of the in an article by and a study by, because your readers know that. So when you say Kessler 2000 found that, they know it's an article or study. So don't waste words, okay? Be very concise in your writing. Only cite the author's last name and date. Never include the title of a study or article. Don't include the author's first names. Don't do initials, nothing. right? Last name and date. Cite sources with no author names. If the article has no author name, cite it using the title, right? Example, Analysis of Leadership Styles, 2010 suggested that because there's no author name on that paper. Citing sources with no clear publication date. Always include a date if it's available. If the publication date is unknown, use n.d instead of a date. This stands for date not known. The exception is for URLs, right? Because with the URL, there's no date, with, pointing to a website, right? So when you cite your website, don't include the URL as a citation in the body of the report. Never in the body of a report shall we see a URL, right? So put the topic of the site or the name of the site or whatever in your citation. And then in terms of the date, put the current year where you're writing a paper. And that way we know that if the site changes later, that this was the way the site looked in this year, 2022. Okay. Citing direct quotes. If you cite direct quotes, you need to include the page number for the direct quote as well in your paper. We generally don't do a lot of direct quote citations in our graduate work. I'm almost done. I won't be much longer. Other questions about citing sources, the OWL guide at Purdue University is usually considered the gold standard online for looking up questions that you have about how to do APA style. Topic 6, the references section has to be after the last chapter, but before the appendices. Sometimes students put it after the appendices. Center of the page title, but don't include punctuation marks at the end. Double space all the references, but no blank lines or extra spacing between the entries. Using the hanging indentation style. I have examples over here on the right-hand side of hanging indentation. It's the opposite of paragraph format, right? Paragraph, you indent the paragraph and then you come back. Here, the first line is left justified and then the rest of the content is indented. That's called hanging indentation style. It's easy to do. If you're not sure about that, you can always use your search engine to figure that out. List the references in alphabetical orders. And again, if you have any questions, use the OWL guide. Are references and bibliography sections required? If you cite one thing in your paper, you have to have a references section. And the what's in the references must be cited in the paper. When I did my dissertation, I got in trouble for this, right? Because I had some things in my references that weren't cited in the paper. And my committee just knocked me pretty hard for that. So references has to be one-to-one match, citations to references, references to citations. If you have other things that you gathered in the course of your research and you want to share that information, you can add a bibliography section. It's pretty easy to do. You copy your references over and then you add the other things that you didn't cite in your paper. So bibliography is optional. Reference is mandatory if you cite one single thing. Last topic is about tenses and the use of this word will. And it's so common for students, really all writers, to misuse this word, right? We only use the word will to describe actions that will occur in the future. We don't describe them to occur a section that's about to appear, for example, right? So, and I have examples here. Surveys will be distributed starting on a future date. Interviews will be conducted, right? Once surveys have been returned, the data will be organized. These are things that will occur in the future. It's the only time you ever use the word will. Do not use the word will to describe present tense activities. In general, the word will should be avoided if you can avoid it. And you can see examples of when the will word should not be used. This report will examine, right? The report examines. This chapter will describe. Chapter's already written. The chapter describes. This research will only focus on. This research focuses on, right? This report will present the facts. This report presents the fact. The survey will include questions, but it's at the end, right? So the survey includes questions. No will words. Get rid of those, right? And there's just tons and tons of examples here. And then in terms of past tense, some students get nervous about me saying don't use the will word, and they start writing in the past tense all of a sudden. But really, not using the will word is really writing in the present tense. And so you really don't need to consider shifting to the past tense because I said this, right? So please don't overdo that. If you have any questions, talk to your professors. You can also do a lot of research online. I just wanted to present to you the major concepts of graduate school writing and getting A's on all your written products. So I hope this has been useful to you, and thank you for your time and for listening.